How do you take gluten-free baked goods from good to great?
Well, today on WTF, we're going to look at all of the ingredients in the Gluten-Free Essentials Value Pack and how to make everything from biscuits to brownies. Hello and welcome to WTF, where we transform food here in the Modernist Pantry Test Kitchen. I'm Chef Scott Guerin.
And I'm Janie Wang, one of the owners of Modernist Pantry. Now, here on WTF, every week we talk about unique ingredients and techniques and show you recipes that you can do in your own kitchen. So remember, subscribe, ring the bell, and you'll get notified of whatever next fun thing we come up with. And this week, we're going to be talking about our gluten-free Baker's Essential Pack, a follow-up to our episode a few weeks back about the regular bakers, because the gluten-free folks, they want the same delicious treats. So enter to win a free gluten-free essentials pack, and just stick around and we'll tell you how later in this episode. And I think, Scott, when we talk about gluten-free baking, I like to start really with what are the major issues that people face when they do gluten-free baking, and then kind of use that as the transition into what are the ingredients we're talking about today, and then how do they help address those problems. So let's start with what are the big ones?
So the big ones are you're removing gluten from starch. And when you do that, the gluten is what gives the whole structure to bread. It captures the bubbles, which allow for the rise, and actually when it cooks, it tightens up, and it maintains its shape. It does so many great things for bread, but when you remove it, that's where we run into the issues of, okay, if I add yeast to just, let's just say our perfect baking flour, it's only going to do so much because of the tapioca in there. So we have to find the right ingredients to place into whatever recipe we're making to get the correct texture and lift and shape for the bread.
Yeah, and that's a really great place. So let's if we want to break them down into texture, lift, and shape. So let's start with texture. Which ingredient really helps with texture here?
So actually the flour is going to work great for texture just because of the rice flour and the tapioca flour that are in it. It's not as gritty as regular rice flour is. That's a big point, because sometimes you get these gluten-free loaves and they have this weird, awkward texture that it just does not remind you of bread.
Yeah.
Also, you're going to get into something like the gluten replacement. That's going to help you with the texture because it's going to give you that lift, that airiness, almost like a sponge that you'll get out of that, as well as expandex as well. So you're not going to have to use every single one of these ingredients in every single recipe, but you may have to pick and choose and put in where you need to one of these ingredients.
Yeah, and if someone's really facing an issue with volume, like they're, whatever they're making, just too dense, too flat, what do you recommend for that?
I do absolutely recommend a combination of the expandex and the gluten replacement in with the flour, because it's going to just help with, almost, balloon that up, and it will hold that shape, and when it cooks, it will kind of set it in that beautiful loaf rather than collapsing, which you see also.
Yeah, and then we do have a couple other ingredients in here. One is the yeast. Do you want to talk about the yeast a little bit?
Yeah, so to get that big, beautiful shape, you have to have something that's going to create that carbon dioxide that's in there. So you're going to need the yeast, which is a beautiful Instafirm Gold, and that's a yeast that you can use in anything with anything. It's a really versatile yeast, as well as our perfect baking powder. So the yeast is going to give that initial rise as it's the bread is fermenting, and then if you need a little extra boost to get that last bit of lift, you can then use the baking powder.
Right. And one of the really nice things that we've done over the past few years is that we've developed a lot of gluten-free recipes, all of which are available on our blog. You'll find them in the links in the description below. We're going to be covering them today, just kind of going over what they are. And I think one of the things that we've noticed as we've done our different tests is that there's really no one-size-fits-all when it comes to gluten-free baking. You can't just be like, oh, I'm going to use the same ratios on everything and it's going to come out delicious. And that's the main reason why we want to do the value pack, is so that you have all the ingredients at your disposal. So you can say, oh, okay, I'm doing cinnamon rolls. Like, what do I need for that? Oh, I'm doing bread, or I'm doing brownies. So there's a lot of versatility that the value pack is going to give you.
Yeah, it's a nice toolkit to just, okay, I need this tool for this job, and this is what it's going to do. One last thing I didn't touch on is actually the perfect gluten-free baking powder. Well, all baking powder is gluten-free. This one is special for this, is that it's a late-acting. So it's just the late-acting portion of baking powder. So as it heats up, it'll give a final lift to it rather than anything at the beginning. So you're really going to get a late lift out of it, just to prevent that, the collapse of your dough.
Yeah, and I do want to go over all these recipes that you have here. There's more on the blog, but we took kind of a sample of some of our favorites today to talk to you about. And that's just kind of to quickly address a question that a lot of gluten-free bakers have, which is allergens, and just kind of want to point out that these products that we're presenting today, they do not contain any of the big 8 allergens. The baking powder is aluminum-free, so if you're concerned about that, just know that we do take that into consideration when we're thinking about gluten-free baking. So, all right, so let's jump into, what do we have?
All right, so we have some pretty basic recipes here. We have our muffins. We have brownies. The brownies are great, surprisingly delicious.
Unsurprisingly delicious.
Well, people always sometimes they think of gluten-free is that
good.
they're not going to be good. They can't have that right texture, the fudginess to it. But these are amazing, and it's all due to our ingredients here, especially the gluten replacement. You just kind of give a tackiness, that fudginess that you want out of it. It's not crumbling. It's not falling apart. The biscuits are really wonderful. That's a new recipe that we have. We're actually going to do a demo of the biscuits themselves. And we found just cooking them into a ring mold gave us that big perfect lift to give a nice pillowy inside that's short enough, similar to a regular biscuit, so it's not chewy or anything like that. It's a really nice biscuit recipe. And then we have one of our favorite new recipes, which is the cinnamon rolls, which are delicious. You should eat them pretty soon after coming out of the oven. They're nice and warm and rich. This is a really special recipe that we came up with, and you can see that whole recipe done on our Instagram or later this week on our YouTube channel.
Yeah, and before we jump into the demo, can you quickly go over which ingredients are in these recipes?
Yeah, so the best thing about these recipes, they all use some sort of mixture of these ingredients. So the muffins use, obviously the flour is in every single one of these recipes, so that's going to be the main one you're going to use. So the flour is in there, and then we have the baking the gluten-free replacements in every single one of these recipes as well. The yeast is actually only in the cinnamon rolls for this, and then the baking powder is in every single one of these recipes as well. So we tried to find recipes that you were going to get the most out of this pack with. And then the biscuits, I think, the biscuits and the cinnamon rolls both have the expandex as well. So you're going to hold on to that moisture. You want to maintain that moisture with expandex. So over time, they're not going to just get really, really stale, which is a big culprit of gluten-free baking.
Wonderful. All right, let's see, how do we make this biscuit here?
Great. So it's very simple. We try to make our gluten-free recipes as similar to the traditional method. So if you're a newly gluten-free person and you're used to baking, some of it, the method is a big part of what you're doing. So we want to keep that same method. So we're going to do the same biscuit method, but we're just going to do it into a mixer. So we have our perfect gluten-free baking flour. We have expandex, and that just goes into our dry mix. Then we have our other dry ingredients. So just going to mix in a little bit of sugar. With gluten-free baking, you sometimes find that it doesn't get as brown or as Maillard on the outside as a traditional bread flour or AP flour would. So a little bit of extra sugar in there is going to help with that kind of color on the outside. There's other things you can use as well. There's some salt here. Our perfect gluten-free baking powder.
That's very little flour.
Yeah, so baking powder and then a little bit of baking soda because we want to have an initial lift. The baking soda is going to give us an initial lift, and then the baking powder is going to be a late acting to help with that. Then we have our gluten replacement. All right, and then what we do here is we freeze our butter. So we freeze the butter into shards so we don't have to do the cutting because we don't want to melt this butter into the flour itself. So if you freeze the butter after shredding it, then you can mix this in really quickly without having to work it too much.
Okay.
So I'm just going to mix that up until the butter is coated. And then I'm going to add my yogurt. So you can use any yogurt. We prefer, like a naturally fermented Greek-style yogurt, and then heavy cream. The heavy cream is going to work really well because it's going to add a little bit of extra fat as well as the water that you need for the recipe to work. And it's so simple. You just mix it until it comes together, and it's just like biscuit dough. You mix it till it comes together. You don't want to over-mix it, because if you over-mix it, you could, potentially have that, not gluten development, but it's the I'm free perfect gluten replacement overdeveloped. So you just want to mix it until it's kind of sandy like this, and then I can show you quickly. You mix it till it's sandy, and then if you apply a little bit of pressure, you can get that nice shape.
Yeah.
That way we can punch it out into the perfect sizes that we need. We don't want to have it be overly moist, because that expandex is going to hold on to the moisture really well. That's what you want. But if it's overly moist, then sometimes it just kind of pancakes out, and that's not what a biscuit looks like.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that Scott mentioned earlier is that we do this in the ring mold, and it's optional, but we found it made a huge difference. So if you do it without, we did with and without, and the ones with were just so much better.
Yeah, it makes it so much better. It gives it something to kind of climb up as well. And that's something that we find with all baking, gluten-free baking, is it wants to kind of climb up the edges rather than allowing it to, the gluten would naturally let it come up over the top of a pan, but you want to allow the gluten-free baked goods to climb up something.
Yep. And in order, if you're like, I'm so excited to try this, I can't wait to enter to win, you can enter to win by leaving in the comments below for the next 2 weeks your favorite gluten-free baked good, or something that you miss about gluten-free once you've gone gluten-free and you would love to experience again, because that really, help us come up with ideas for what else can we do. And if you do go onto our blog, we have all of today's recipes available, but we also have pasta, we have pizza, we have bread,
bagels.
We have all these other things that might take a little bit more, maybe include a couple extra ingredients that we put in there to make it extra tasty, but those all those resources are available to you as well. So I feel like that's about everything. Is there anything we else want to do?
No, I think we nailed it.
Okay, sounds wonderful. So remember, leave your comment below in order to enter to win a gluten-free baker's essential value pack. And from here in the Modernist Pantry Test Kitchen, I'm Janie Wang.
And I'm Scott Garrett.
Thank you so much for watching, and if you haven't already, like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that bell so you get notified when we drop a new video.
To get today's recipes and all of our recipes, remember to go to blog.modernistpantry.com, where you'll get recipes, ask a chefs, tips and tricks, and more.
And if you haven't already, tell a friend so they know what's going on here at WTF.
And as always, to get any of the ingredients you saw today, you can go to modernistpantry.com to shop.
And until next time, we'll be here in the test kitchen helping you create memorable and magical experiences.